Imagine stepping outside for a casual walk and being crushed by a falling cow, or winning the lottery, only to meet a fate so bizarre no one would believe it. History is filled with stories of people who met their end in ways so strange, so downright unbelievable, you'd think they were made up. But they're 100% real. From freak accidents to mind-bending coincidences, get ready for 2 hours of people who died in extremely unusual ways. It was 1989, and a man called Death Wish was about to prove why he deserved the nickname. At 23 years old, Death Wish was a Scottish painter with a penchant for dangerous and reckless stunts. The young man would often engage in outrageous behavior, the kind of activities that most of us would never dream of doing. His real name is lost, or perhaps it was never made public. But his exploits were infamous among friends and locals. Known for smashing glasses on his head, swallowing sharp objects like keys and glass, and performing life-threatening tricks, he was described by police as being of good health physically but of low intellect. It was a harsh description maybe, but it was this combination of durability and recklessness that turned him into a figure of morbid fascination. Among his extensive repertoire of mind-boggling stunts, one stood out, swallowing and regurgitating a pool ball. One fateful night in 1989, Death Wish spent hours drinking heavily at a local pub. After closing time, the publican decided to defy legal closing hours and readmitted Death Wish and his friends, allowing them to continue drinking long after others had left. But as the evening stretched on, the painter turned to his signature stunt, a performance that his companions had seen many times before. The act involved maneuvering a pool ball to the back of his throat, holding it there briefly, and then regurgitating it. It had become a party trick, one that amused his friends. Maybe it was the young man's way to increase his social standing. This time, however, he opted for a white cue ball instead of a standard-colored pool ball. The difference was subtle but significant. The cue ball, used in billiards games, measures 4.75 centimeters in diameter, slightly smaller than the 5.03 centimeters of a standard pool ball. Though this size difference appears negligible, it drastically reduces the ball's volume, making it the perfect size to become lodged in the throat. Unbeknownst to Death Wish, the cue ball was a catastrophic choice. He placed the ball in his mouth and began the familiar process. This time, however, he quickly showed signs of distress. Panicked, he ran out of the pub and into the street. His collapse was sudden and horrifying. His face turned blue as he struggled for air, the ball wedged firmly in his pharynx. His friends tried to help, managing to get their hands into his mouth, but the ball would not budge. Moments later, an ambulance arrived. The medical team attempted to insert an airway tube to restore breathing, but the blockage was too severe. Within 15 minutes of swallowing the cue ball, the young man succumbed to suffocation. The ambulance crew pronounced him dead at the scene. A post-mortem examination revealed the precise cause of death. The cue ball was lodged so tightly in his throat that it completely obstructed his airway. The reduced diameter and volume of the cue ball, compared to standard pool balls, created the perfect conditions for such an obstruction, turning an otherwise survivable stunt into a fatal miscalculation. While Death Wish's tricks had once made him a figure of dark humor, his death serves as a grim reminder of the thin line between bravado and tragedy. Today, his story lives on as a cautionary tale of the fatal consequences of reckless risk-taking. November 8, 2021, and Harry Byrne from Kilkenny, Ireland, was at school. At 13 years old, Harry was a bright, spirited teenager with an unwavering love for sports, particularly hurling. Known for his infectious smile and kind-hearted nature, Harry was described by family and friends as a standout young man. His dedication to hurling, a game deeply ingrained in his community, was evident in his many achievements. Harry had recently won 2 under-13 county championships and had been called for trials with the Kilkenny County Development Squad, a significant honor for the young athlete and his family. That November afternoon, though, things took a devastating turn for the 13-year-old. It was lunch break at St. Kieran's College in Kilkenny. Harry Byrne was playing hurling with friends, enjoying the sport he loved, when tragedy struck. A sliotar, a hard leather ball used in hurling, hit Harry in the throat. At first, the boy said he felt fine, though he did have a headache. Then, in a matter of moments, he collapsed. A supervising teacher, Simon Reedy, was alerted by one of the boys and rushed to the scene. Harry was found about 20 yards behind the goalpost, lying in the recovery position, surrounded by a group of his classmates. Emergency services were called, and Harry was rushed to St. Luke's General Hospital in Kilkenny. Despite being transferred to a hospital in Dublin for further treatment, he succumbed to his injuries the following day, leaving his family, friends, and community in profound grief. The post-mortem examination revealed the extent of the damage caused by the slyotar. The impact caused a catastrophic injury, tearing an artery in his neck and leading to fatal internal bleeding in his brain. The tear in Harry's carotid artery, a vital blood vessel supplying the brain, was deemed a freak injury, extremely rare and devastating. Kilkenny County Coroner Tim Keeley emphasized during the inquest that even if Harry had been wearing a helmet, it would not have prevented his death given the nature and location of the injury. The whole community felt the impact of Harry's loss. Tributes poured in from across Ireland, with countless messages expressing sorrow and support for his grieving family. Harry's parents, Fergal and Annette, along with his siblings Jake, Amy, and Sam, described him as a boy with a heart of gold. His local Gaelic Athletic Association club, Young Irelands, remembered him as a talented and passionate player who was loved by all. Kilkenny Rugby Football Club, where Harry played rugby, echoed these sentiments, calling him a fantastic young boy with a larger-than-life character. Hundreds of mourners gathered at his funeral to pay their respects, including classmates, teammates, and representatives from numerous sports organizations. Harry's coffin, adorned with his Young Ireland's jersey, was carried into the church amidst a guard of honor formed by his schoolmates and sports friends. Parish priest Father Patrick Dalton spoke movingly during the Requiem Mass, reflecting on the enormity of the loss. He said that when someone so young died unexpectedly, there were no words to ease the pain. Harry Burns' passing is all the more tragic given his young age. Even more, his death is a reminder of life's fragility and the unpredictable risks inherent in even the most ordinary activities. But Harry's memory endures. It was January 20th, 2014 in Limpopo, South Africa. The day began like any other for the Komape family. Michael, a lively 5-year-old, had just started grade R at Malodumela Primary School in Jabeng Village. His family was excited about his first steps in education, hopeful that school would open opportunities for him. But by the end of that day, their lives would change forever. Michael's school, like many others in the area, lacked proper facilities. The toilets were basic pit latrines made from rusty corrugated metal and unstable wooden planks. That day, Michael needed to use the restroom during class. He went to the pit toilets, likely unaware of the danger they posed. The iron sheet serving as the seat was fragile, but as a child he probably assumed it was safe. Tragically, the sheet gave way when Michael sat down and he fell into the waste-filled pit. The weak structure collapsed, trapping him inside. Michael lost his life in the latrine. He was only 5 years old. It took hours before anyone realized something was wrong. When Michael didn't return to class, his absence wasn't immediately noticed. Later, someone checked the toilets and discovered the heartbreaking scene, a small hand reaching out from the pit. This horrific discovery sent shockwaves through the school and the community. James Komape, Michael's father, rushed to the school after hearing the news. He was overcome with grief when he saw his son's hand in the waste. He later described the image as one that would haunt him forever, calling it an unimaginable loss. Authorities took at least 4 hours to retrieve Michael's body. An autopsy revealed grim details, such as the wrinkling of his feet, indicating how long he had been submerged. To add to the family's suffering, a friend of James attempted to document the scene for evidence, but school staff forcibly deleted the photos, seemingly to hide their negligence. Michael's mother, Rosina, learned of the tragedy through a call from the school. When she arrived and saw her son's arm in the pit, she fainted. The grief deeply affected her, and she later lost her job as a domestic worker due to her inability to cope with the trauma. This tragedy sparked national outrage. The conditions at Malodumela Primary School were not unique. Over 4,500 schools across South Africa relied on unsafe pit latrines, many of which were poorly constructed and hazardous. Limpopo was one of the worst affected provinces. Despite the South African Constitution guaranteeing access to proper sanitation, this right remained out of reach for thousands of children. The Komape family, with help from a human rights organization called Section 27, sued the Limpopo Department of Education. They sought justice for Michael and compensation for the emotional and financial toll on their family. They demanded damages for trauma, constitutional violations, and funeral costs, totaling over 2 million South African rands, or around $110,000. The legal fight was lengthy and challenging. In 2018, Judge Gerrit Muller ruled that the government had failed to ensure safe sanitation in schools, violating students' rights to basic education. However, the judge dismissed the Komape family's claim for emotional damages, stating there was not enough evidence of severe trauma. This decision was widely criticized as dismissive of the family's profound suffering. The Komape family and their legal team appealed the ruling, taking the case to the Supreme Court of Appeal, or SCA. During the hearings, the judges were deeply moved. Justice Mohammed Navsa described Michael's death as one of the most undignified imaginable. The court also heard of similar tragedies, such as the 2018 death of Lumka Mkethwa, a 5-year-old girl who fell into a pit latrine in Eastern Cape. These incidents highlighted the urgent need for systemic reform. In 2020, the SCA ruled in favor of the Komape family. They were awarded 1.4 million South African rands, or around $77,000, for emotional shock and grief, along with coverage for future medical expenses to address the psychological impact of the tragedy. The judgment was seen as a milestone for justice in South Africa. Despite this legal victory, the pain of losing Michael remains. His parents, James and Rosina, and his siblings continue to live with the trauma of his death. Michael's laughter and dreams were stolen in an instant, leaving an irreplaceable void. Michael's death became a symbol of the fight for better school sanitation in South Africa. Following the tragedy, President Cyril Ramaphosa promised to eradicate pit latrines in schools. However, progress has been slow, hindered by funding shortages and bureaucratic delays. Thousands of schools still use these unsafe facilities, putting many children at risk. The Komape family remains committed to advocating for change. They hope Michael's death will not be forgotten and will inspire efforts to ensure safe and dignified conditions for all children. Their goal is to prevent other families from enduring the heartbreak they've suffered. October 14, 2017, in Auburn, Alabama. The Andrews family, parents Tracy and Corey and their 6 children, was spending the afternoon at Brewster's Real Ice Cream, a popular family spot. Among the children was Sadie Grace Andrews, a lively 3-year-old with blonde hair and an infectious smile. Sadie, the 3rd youngest, was known for her playful energy, love of singing, and curiosity about the world. She was a joy to everyone around her. That day, the kids played in the grassy picnic area near the ice cream shop, while their parents kept watch. It seemed like a perfect day in a safe environment. However, hidden danger lay beneath the surface. While playing with 2 siblings, Sadie wandered toward an in-ground grease trap outside the shop. These traps, used to collect cooking oil waste, are typically covered for safety. However, the lid on this trap was made of wood and had become unstable over time. Sadie stepped onto the lid, which gave way under her weight. She fell 6 feet into the grease-filled container, and the lid flipped back, concealing her. When Sadie's family realized she was missing, they began searching, calling her name. Within about 10 minutes, her father noticed the grease trap lid was slightly open. When he looked inside, he discovered Sadie. He pulled her out and immediately sought help. A young employee from the shop performed CPR while waiting for emergency responders. Sadie was rushed to East Alabama Medical Center, but despite all efforts, she could not be revived. Her sudden loss devastated her family, who remembered her as a loving, joyful child with a strong faith and zest for life. The tragedy shook the local community, as well as the owners of Brewster's Real Ice Cream, Lance and Kara Latham. In a public statement, the Lathams expressed their heartbreak and extended condolences to the Andrews family and their employee who had tried to save Sadie. In the aftermath, the Andrews family sought accountability. They filed a lawsuit against Brewster's and the manufacturer of the grease trap lid, Tough Tight Incorporated, citing negligence. Their attorney, J. Cole Portis, emphasized that Sadie's death was preventable. The Andrews family also worked to prevent similar tragedies. Their advocacy led to the passing of the Sadie Grace Andrews Act in Alabama. The law requires grease trap covers to be made of durable materials and equipped with locking mechanisms for safety. This legislative effort was a way to honor Sadie's memory and prevent future accidents. Despite their advocacy, the Andrews family was heartbroken to learn of a similar incident in Rochester, New York, where another 3-year-old child fell into an unsecured grease trap and tragically died. For Corey Andrews, the news was a painful reminder of their loss. The incident reinforced her belief in the need for a nationwide law, as it was heartbreaking to see another family endure the same tragedy. Through their nonprofit organization, Sadie's Hope Ministries, the family provides support to others grieving the loss of a child. The nonprofit offers care packages and resources to help families navigate their pain. The Andrews children also keep Sadie's memory alive, remembering her joyful spirit and her love for singing "Jesus Loves Me." Sadie's father, Tracy, reflected on her lasting impact, noting that she loved everyone without hesitation and never saw the bad in people. She simply loved. Though her life was tragically cut short, Sadie's legacy lives on through her family's efforts to create a safer world and provide comfort to those in grief. It was January 7, 2012, a cold Saturday evening in Dufftown, Scotland, a small town famous for its Glenfiddich distillery. Established in 1886 by William Grant, Glenfiddich is renowned worldwide for its single malt Scotch whiskey and is a source of pride for the community. But that evening, a tragic event unfolded, leaving the town in shock. Brian Eddles, a 46-year-old employee of Glenfiddich, was well known and respected in Dufftown. With 23 years at the distillery, he had risen to a senior position and was admired by his colleagues for his dedication. Described by neighbors as quiet and hard-working, Brian lived in nearby Keith with his wife, Irene. The day before the incident, they had celebrated Irene's 54th birthday. No one could have predicted the devastating turn of events that followed. At 10:40 p.m. on January 7th, emergency services were called to Glenfiddich Distillery. Brian had climbed into one of the large washback tanks used in whiskey production. These wooden vats, standing 16 feet tall and holding up to 50,000 liters of liquid, contained water and yeast as part of the fermentation process. Despite rapid response from paramedics and firefighters, they were unable to save him. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities confirmed there were no suspicious circumstances. News of Brian's death spread quickly, deeply affecting the close-knit community. The distillery closed for 2 days to honor his memory. Glenfiddich representatives expressed their condolences, acknowledging Brian's long-standing contributions to the company. Bill White, the group operations director, described him as a highly valued team leader and extended sympathies to his family and colleagues. Brian's family, his wife Irene and their 2 adult children, Julie, 24, and Stuart, 21, were devastated by the loss. They chose to grieve privately, though Irene later spoke briefly, describing the shock and their effort to move forward, acknowledging that there was little else they could do. Neighbors echoed her sentiments, with many expressing disbelief. One neighbor, Eileen McKenzie, remarked that it was a horrible way for someone to go, noting that most people she had spoken to were upset about it. Even those who didn't know Brian well were affected. A waitress at a local pub, the Commercial Hotel, remembered him as a quiet man who occasionally stopped by for a meal or drink. Although nobody at the pub knew him well, as he lived in Keith, he had seemed nice enough. The news left everyone shaken up. Brian had joined Glenfiddich in 1989 and spent over 2 decades contributing to its success. As a team leader for the last 6 years, he gained the respect of colleagues for his leadership and expertise. His dedication to the distillery reflected the strong bond between Glenfiddich and the Dufftown community. The incident raised questions about Brian's struggles, which had not been apparent to those around him. Friends and neighbors described him as steady and kind, making his sudden actions that night all the more puzzling. Speculation arose about whether he had been silently battling inner challenges or dealing with pressures from work or personal life. However, no clear answers emerged. Local officials, including Councillor Michael McConaughey, expressed condolences, noting the profound impact of the event on the community. While the incident highlighted the importance of mental health awareness and workplace support, no public discussions on these issues followed. For the workers at Glenfiddich, the aftermath of Brian's death was particularly challenging. Passing by the washback tanks now served as a reminder of their colleague. Tourists visiting the distillery, unaware of the tragedy, likely saw only its historical significance and reputation for excellence. But for those who knew Brian, the distillery's story now carried a layer of sorrow. Brian's death left a lasting impression on Dufftown. It underscored the unseen struggles many individuals face and the need for open conversations about mental well-being. While life at Glenfiddich eventually returned to normal, the memory of that January evening remained with those who worked and lived in the area. 28, 2010 was supposed to be an ordinary day in Mount Carroll, Illinois. As morning came, three young men, Wyatt Whitebread, Alex Pacas, and Will Piper, made their way toward the Hosbach grain storage complex, where they were supposed to walk down the corn. Yet by nightfall, the rural town would be gripped by unspeakable tragedy. At 14 years old, Wyatt Whitebread was a spirited boy. He had been excited to earn his first paycheck working at the Hosbach grain storage complex. But things had changed. Wyatt had recently expressed unease about the nature of his work, even proclaiming that he wished he never had to see another kernel of corn for the rest of his life. His co-workers were 19-year-old Alex Pacas and 20-year-old Will Piper. None of them had experience in grain handling, which had proved to be a lot more complicated than they'd anticipated. And none of them fully grasped the dangers of the task they faced that day, breaking up clogged corn in a grain bin towering 4 stories high. The job, referred to as walking down the corn, required the boys to shovel kernels toward a central drain hole at the bottom of the bin, allowing the corn to flow freely into the conveyor below. The work began smoothly, but the conditions were dangerous. Beneath the 250,000 bushels of damp, compacted corn was an active conveyor system whose continuous movement turned the grain into a fluid trap. It was about 9:45 a.m. that day when 14-year-old Wyatt began sinking into the corn, the damp grain swallowing him like quicksand. Alex and Will sprang into action. The older boys attempted to pull Wyatt free, grasping him under the arms, but it was useless. The unstable surface gave way beneath their feet, and before they knew it, Alex and Will started to sink as well. Wyatt disappeared first, buried by the cascading corn. Alex and Will struggled to stay afloat as the grains piled relentlessly around them. Alex's cries for help grew fainter as the corn reached his neck and then his chin. Will, trapped up to his chest, used his free arm to try and keep the kernels away from Alex's head. But Will couldn't keep up with the cascade of corn. Soon after, he couldn't do anything but watch in horror as his friend succumbed and wondered if he was going to be next. By now, the corn was up to his chin. Hosbach supervisor Matt Schaffner called for help and then climbed into the bin himself to try to dig the boys out. But he quickly realized it was an impossible task. The Mount Carroll Fire Department arrived within minutes, quickly realizing the enormity of the situation. Grain bins are notoriously treacherous, and extracting victims from them requires specialized techniques. Firefighters, paramedics, and technical rescue teams converged on the site, eventually numbering over 200 responders. Rescuers employed grain vacuums, custom-made rescue tubes, and even improvised methods like cutting the bottom out of a bucket to shield Will's face. They worked tirelessly in stifling heat, battling a heat index of 114 degrees inside the metal silo. Despite their efforts, progress was painstakingly slow. Will Piper remained trapped for nearly 6 hours, his body immobilized and his mind haunted by the death of his friends. At one point, rescuers instructed him to embrace Alex's lifeless body to create space for the vacuum to work. Will was eventually rescued and taken to the hospital. Alex's body was retrieved, but Wyatt's remains were buried under layers of corn. Rescuers worked late into the night, finally recovering the 14-year-old's remains. The loss of Wyatt Whitebread and Alex Pacas devastated their families. Will Piper faced profound emotional scars. Even more, the tragedy revealed glaring safety failures at Hosbach LC. OSHA's investigation uncovered 25 safety violations, including 12 classified as willful. The boys had received no safety training, were not equipped with harnesses, and were sent into the bin while the machinery below remained operational, a direct violation of safety protocols. Hosbach LLC was initially fined $555,000, but this was later reduced to $200,000, igniting outrage among the victims' families. Civil lawsuits followed, with a jury awarding nearly $17 million in damages, $8 million each to the families of Wyatt and Alex, and $875,000 to Will. The verdict marked a record for Carroll County, but brought little solace to the grieving families. Wyatt's mother, Carla, a retired Army major, struggled with the knowledge that Wyatt hadn't told her he was running down corn. Alex's mother, Annette, grappled with the knowledge that her son died in terror, his final moments consumed by fear. Nothing could bring their children back. It was late afternoon of January 29, 1931, when neighbors and friends gathered at Edward and Delphine Hines' farmstead near Grafton, North Dakota. The Hines were throwing a festive dinner party which promised to be an evening of dancing, laughter, and games, a much-needed reprieve from the harsh winter. But as the night wore on, the unsuspecting guests were served a meal that would forever be marked in North Dakota's history. The party concluded with a late-night spread prepared by Delphine. Among the courses was a pea salad featuring home-canned peas, which Delphine had prepared herself, mayonnaise, cheese, and lettuce. Unbeknownst to everyone, including the Hines, these peas harbored a hidden deadly menace. The nightmare began the following day. Arthur Geranby, a 31-year-old farmer, experienced intense stomach pains while tending to his chores. He alerted his family, which rushed to his aid, but not even them or the doctors they employed could save Arthur. By Saturday, he had slipped into a coma. In the meantime, the doctors had figured out the cause of Arthur's illness, the botulinum toxin, produced by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. On Saturday afternoon, Arthur Geranby succumbed to the toxin's effects. His death marked the beginning of an unrelenting series of tragedies. Harry Chapioski, an 8th grader who had attended the party, appeared healthy enough to play in a basketball game on Friday. Yet by the next evening, he too was gone. Harry's mom, Mrs. Thomas Chapioski, died a day later, followed closely by her lifelong friend, who had also attended the party, Mrs. Elmer Stoke. Delphine Hine and her family were not spared. The first to fall ill was Edward Jr., her 16-year-old son, who passed away on Saturday evening. Delphine herself succumbed just 4 hours later. By Sunday night, Edward Sr. and their eldest daughter, 20-year-old Elizabeth, had also perished. Genevieve, only 15, followed early Monday morning. The poison did not discriminate, taking the lives of 13 party attendees over 9 days. Among the deceased were lifelong friends, close relatives, and neighbors. The deaths were eerily consistent, with symptoms of dizziness, impaired vision, and respiratory failure marking the toxin's lethal progression. Those who survived, such as Elmer Stoke, were spared only by chance. Elmer had not eaten the salad. Medical experts acted swiftly once botulism was identified as the culprit. A specialist from the University of Chicago traveled to Grafton with antitoxin serum, but the treatment was rare and prohibitively expensive. It was also only effective if administered early in the illness, and by the time it reached the town, most victims were beyond saving. The last fatality, Winfield Ware, died 9 days after the party, having shown signs of improvement before his condition rapidly deteriorated. Elmer Stoke wasn't the only survivor. 3 of the Hine children also survived. 14-year-old Richard, 12-year-old Wilfred, and 3-year-old Marvin had been spared only because they were too young to join the party and had remained in their rooms that night. Yet their survival came at an unimaginable cost. They lost both parents and 3 siblings in a matter of days. The boys were taken in by relatives, but their lives were forever altered. Richard, known as Dick, grew up quickly, leaving his relatives' home to work as a farm laborer. He would go on to establish his successful dairy operation in Minnesota, passing away in 2013 at age 96. Wilfred, or Bill, worked in California's aircraft industry, while Marvin, affectionately called Buddy, returned to North Dakota after serving in World War II and built a life in the grain business. Despite their resilience, the trauma of the event lingered with them. Dick's poignant plea to save their mother's wedding ring so they would have something to remember her by underscored the depth of their loss. It was a tragedy unlike anything Grafton or North America had seen before. Residents mourned the victims during a 4-day funeral procession, during which the town closed its businesses and declared a period of mourning. Fear spread as homemakers threw away their home-canned goods, many discarding entire pantries, despite the economic hardship of the Great Depression. For months, some families subsisted on little more than toast and tea, wary of hidden dangers lurking in their food. But there are lessons to be learned even in the darkest of times. The disaster prompted greater scrutiny of home canning practices, highlighting the importance of proper sterilization and the use of pressure canners for low-acid foods. Though botulism remains rare, the Grafton tragedy stands as a stark reminder of its deadly potential. Today, advancements in food safety guidelines and education seek to prevent such a tragedy from recurring. However, the memory of the Poison Pea Party became a cautionary tale, etched into the history of a town that would never forget. In January 2007, Sheila K. Ross and her husband Dane, seasoned truck drivers from McLeod, Oklahoma, were on a routine trip. They had traveled to Yuma, Arizona to collect supplies from a Dole plant. But what began as an ordinary evening would take a devastating turn, changing the lives of all those involved. That evening, when they arrived at the plant in Arizona, Sheila exited their truck to retrieve paperwork for their load. But when the 47-year-old woman failed to return, her husband Dane became overcome by worry. He too exited the truck and searched the premises himself, but there was no sign of his wife. Dane decided to notify the Yuma police and ask for their help. Officers conducted an extensive search but found no sign of Sheila. As hours turned into days, her disappearance remained a mystery. 3 days later, a dock worker at the Hy-Vee grocery store distribution center in Chariton, Iowa, made a grim discovery. Sheila's body was found in the back of a semi-trailer delivering lettuce. The trailer, owned by a different trucking company, had been at the same Dole plant in Yuma on the night Sheila disappeared. Authorities determined that Sheila had been pinned inside the truck during loading, and the compressive force of the pallets of lettuce caused her death. According to Dr. John Kramer, the autopsy showed Sheila was as Investigators believe Sheila was accidentally pushed into the trailer by a forklift operating in the loading area. Unnoticed by the driver, she became trapped between the heavy pallets of produce. The intense pressure left her unable to breathe. Her body remained undetected as the trailer traveled nearly 1,500 miles to Iowa. Sheila died on Tuesday, January 30th, 2007. Statements from Dole confirmed the company's cooperation with law enforcement, but offered little solace to Sheila's grieving family. The lettuce in the shipment was destroyed, a minor detail in the face of such a profound loss. Sheila, remembered as a dedicated truck driver and loving wife, had worked alongside Dane for years. Married in 1980, the couple shared a son, Daniel, and a granddaughter. Her funeral service, held on February 5, 2007, brought together family and friends to honor her memory.
August 14, 2010, a warm Saturday morning in Kentucky. Kalita Nicole Hicks, a 20-year-old from Olive Hill, was driving down Country Road 519 in her Chevy. Kalita lived with her parents, John and Janice Abney Hicks. She also had a brother, Jeremy Clayton, and a sister, Stephanie Campbell. That day, Kalita and her passenger decided to make a dangerous move. They planned to switch seats while the car was still moving. Kalita's Chevy had an open T-top, and they believed this would make the swap possible. Their idea was for Kalita to climb onto the roof, while her passenger slid into the driver's seat. Kalita began to pull herself onto the roof of the speeding car, but things took a fatal turn. As she climbed, she lost her balance. Her foot hit the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to swerve. Her passenger tried to regain control by grabbing the wheel, but Kalita had already fallen out of the car. As she fell, Kalita hit a guardrail at a high speed, suffering catastrophic injuries. She was rushed to the University of Kentucky Medical Center in Lexington, where she underwent surgery, but she could not be saved. Kalita passed away later that morning. The Fayette County Coroner's Office confirmed that her injuries from the fall were the cause of her death. Her death was not only tragic, but entirely avoidable. The reckless decision to switch seats while the car was moving cost Kalita her life. Meanwhile, despite avoiding further disaster, the passenger faced legal consequences. He was arrested and charged with driving on a suspended license, improper registration, and having no insurance. Kalita's sudden death devastated her family. Her parents, John and Janice, were left heartbroken. Her siblings, Jeremy and Stephanie, struggled to cope with the loss. Her grandparents, Alfred and Mary Shrum Hicks, along with the rest of her family and friends, mourned the tragic accident. On August 17, 2010, Kalita was laid to rest. Her funeral took place at Globe Funeral Chapel in Olive Hill, Kentucky. Kalita was buried in the Hicks family cemetery on Garvin Ridge in Olive Hill, surrounded by her grieving loved ones. Kalita's story later appeared in the Darwin Awards, a platform highlighting deaths resulting from reckless behavior. The Rydam Cowgirl entry labeled Kalita's death as a cautionary story, a harsh lesson about the dangers of risky actions. There are many lessons to be learned from this tragedy. Most importantly, it shows the dangers of not taking road safety seriously. Attempting dangerous stunts while driving can have dire consequences. While Kalita's passenger tried to prevent a worse outcome by grabbing the wheel, his irresponsible decision, driving on a suspended license, contributed to the situation. Kalita's death forces us to reflect on how things could have gone differently. What if they had simply pulled over to switch seats safely? What if they had considered the potential consequences before taking such a risk? Kalita Nicole Hicks, born in 1989, lost her life at just 20 years old due to a single impulsive decision. Her death tells us the importance of road safety, leaving her family and community to to grieve the loss of a young woman with so much ahead of her. It was August 7th, 1997, in Buxton, North Carolina, a small village on Hatteras Island. Daniel Jones, a 21-year-old student from Woodbridge, Virginia, was on summer break, enjoying a beach day with his girlfriend, Julie Baker. Daniel was curious and adventurous, passionate about the outdoors. He studied at Northern Virginia Community College and worked as a computer systems engineer. On this day, he was doing something he had loved since childhood, digging in the sand. Daniel had been on Hatteras Island for a week with Julie. The couple had been together for 4 years, having met in high school, and they planned to marry. Julie often joined Daniel on his beach outings, and this time was no different. She watched him dig a large hole in the sand, capturing the moment on her video camera. The hole Daniel dug was unusually deep, around 9 feet deep and 8 feet wide. He had spent most of the morning digging, likely enjoying the cooler temperature and break from the wind inside the hole. Nearby beachgoers saw Daniel digging and assumed he was having fun. They didn't think much of it. Around 1:50 p.m., tragedy struck. The hole walls collapsed, burying Daniel under several feet of sand. Julie screamed for help, and people nearby rushed over. Panic quickly set in as they realized how dangerous the situation had become. The sand was heavy and packed tightly, trapping Daniel underneath. Tourists, locals, and rescue workers immediately started digging. They used anything they could find, from their hands to plastic toy shovels. Even Ollie Jarvis, the owner of a nearby tackle shop, handed out shovels to people trying to help. More than 200 people gathered, working together in a desperate attempt to save Daniel. Unfortunately, the sand collapsed into the hole, making it harder to reach him. It took nearly an hour before the rescue team uncovered Daniel's head. They placed an oxygen mask over his face, but it was too late. Daniel was pronounced dead at Hatteras Island Medical Center. The cause of death was suffocation. The news of Daniel's tragic death spread quickly, shocking those who knew him. His mother, Mary Ann Jones, spoke about Daniel's love for digging, recalling that it was something he had done since childhood. He always loved playing in the sand, but never dug that deep, she shared. Daniel wasn't just a regular beachgoer. He was also an Eagle Scout, known for his kindness and dedication to helping others. He regularly volunteered at a homeless shelter in Washington, D.C., handing out sandwiches every Friday night. His death left a deep void in the hearts of many who knew and loved him. Julie Baker, his girlfriend, was devastated. The couple had shared dreams of the future, and Daniel's sudden death shattered those plans. Friends and family gathered to mourn the loss of a young man with so much potential, whose life was cut tragically short. Locals and tourists alike questioned why Daniel had dug such a deep hole. Carol Dillon, owner of the Outer Banks Motel where Daniel had been staying, remembered his kind and friendly demeanor. "He was like a ray of sunshine," she said. Ryan Dawson, a 19-year-old from Buxton who helped in the rescue, expressed his grief over the tragedy. "I was just hoping he'd be alive when we got him out," he said, saddened by the outcome. Daniel Jones's tragic death shows the hidden dangers of everyday activities. Although seemingly harmless, digging deep holes in the sand can turn deadly when the walls collapse. Despite the overwhelming effort from those around him, Daniel could not be saved, leaving his family and friends to grieve the loss of a bright and caring young man.
In 1906, in Brunn, Austria-Hungary, now Brno, Czech Republic, is remembered as one of the most influential mathematicians and logicians of the 20th century. His groundbreaking incompleteness theorems changed the way we understand mathematical systems. Yet despite his brilliance, Gödel's life was overshadowed by severe paranoia and mental health struggles, which eventually led to his tragic death. Gödel's early life was marked by illness. At the age of 6, he suffered from rheumatic fever. Although he recovered, Gödel believed this illness permanently affected his health, fueling lifelong anxiety and a preoccupation with his physical well-being. Over the years, he experienced several nervous breakdowns requiring hospitalization. Despite these challenges, Gödel's intellectual achievements were remarkable. He studied at the University of Vienna during the 1920s when the city was a hub for intellectual thought. He became a key member of the Vienna Circle, a group focused on logic and mathematics. Under the mentorship of Hans Hahn, Gödel completed his doctorate in 1929 at the age of 23. His work revealed that formal mathematical systems were inherently incomplete, no matter how rigorous, a revolutionary concept that recognized him worldwide. In 1931, Gödel published his incompleteness theorems. His first theorem showed that any consistent mathematical system contains truths that cannot be proven within the system itself. The second proved that such systems could not confirm their consistency. This shattered the prevailing belief that all mathematical truths could be derived from basic axioms, securing Gödel's legacy. As his academic reputation grew, Gödel's mental health declined. The political turmoil of the 1930s, including the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, deeply unsettled him. Fearing for his safety and the possibility of being drafted into the German military, Godel fled Austria in 1940 with his wife Adele Nimberski. The couple settled in the United States, where Godel secured a position at Princeton University with the help of Albert Einstein, with whom he formed a close friendship. Godel thrived professionally at Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, but his personal life was plagued by growing paranoia. The 1936 death of his mentor, Moritz Schlick, who was killed by one of his students, intensified Godel's fears of being targeted. He became convinced that someone was trying to harm him through poisoning. This fear grew so intense that he would only eat food prepared and tasted by Adele, who supported him through his struggles. As the years passed, Godel's mental health worsened. He began experiencing hallucinations and developed an irrational distrust of those around him. By the late 1960s, his paranoia extended to friends and colleagues. Despite his continued contributions to mathematics and logic, his deteriorating mental state overshadowed his achievements. In 1977, Adele fell seriously ill and was hospitalized for 6 months. During her absence, Godel refused to eat, convinced that any food not prepared by Adele was unsafe. His refusal to eat led to severe malnutrition. By the time Adele returned, Godel's condition was critical. He passed away on January 14, 1978, weighing just 65 pounds. The official cause of death was malnutrition, brought on by his extreme fear of being harmed. Godel's tragic death reveals how mental health struggles can deeply impact even the most brilliant individuals. His paranoia not only overshadowed his genius, but also ultimately led to his demise. While his groundbreaking work in mathematics and logic remains celebrated, his story is a reminder of the importance of addressing mental health challenges. What if Godel had sought help earlier in life? Could his fears have been managed, allowing him to live a longer and more fulfilling life? His story raises important questions about how society recognizes and supports individuals dealing with mental health issues. Even the brightest minds are not immune to such struggles. Godel's legacy is unmatched intellectual achievement paired with profound personal hardship. His story continues to resonate, reminding us of the balance between brilliance and the human condition. It was June 5, 2014, in Novato, California, when the Moylan family faced an unimaginable loss. Sean Moylan, a 27-year-old known for his kindness and wit, lost his life after falling from the Golden Gate Bridge. His death carried an even deeper resonance as his grandfather, John Moylan, had long fought to make the bridge safer by advocating for barriers to prevent such tragedies. John Moylan was a well-known figure in San Francisco and was celebrated for his dedication to public safety and community service. Born in Ireland, he immigrated to the United States in 1951 and devoted much of his life to union leadership and improving lives. As a board member of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, he spearheaded efforts to install a barrier on the bridge to prevent deaths. His mission became personal after losing a grandnephew under similar circumstances, strengthening his resolve to address this issue. After years of debate, the board approved a barrier plan in 2008. However, progress was slow, and construction wasn't completed for years. Tragically, despite John's tireless advocacy, his grandson Sean became one of the individuals the barrier might have saved. Sean had faced significant emotional challenges for years, despite being seen by many as a bright and caring individual. Earlier in 2014, he survived a life-threatening accident in Eugene, Oregon, when he stepped in front of a moving truck. Evidence suggested it was an intentional act. Though he recovered physically, his emotional pain lingered. Family members, including John, spent time with Sean after the incident, believing he was healing. Just days before his passing, Sean appeared upbeat, joking, and enjoying a meal with his family. On the afternoon of June 5th, Sean went to the Golden Gate Bridge. At around 4:22 p.m., the Coast Guard recovered his body from the waters below, confirming the tragic loss. For John, the heartbreak was profound, as he had spent years fighting for the safety of others on the bridge, only to lose his grandson there. In interviews following Sean's death, John spoke candidly about his grandson's struggles. He described Sean as a generous and good-natured young man who had battled inner pain. Refusing to place blame on the bridge or anyone else, John acknowledged the complexity of his grandson's struggles. He had a problem, and that's it, John said, emphasizing that no single factor was responsible for what happened. Despite his grief, John remained committed to his mission. Just weeks after Sean's death, the Golden Gate Bridge Board was set to meet and finalize funding for a $68 million project to install a safety net under the bridge. This initiative was bittersweet for John. He had fought for it for years, yet it came too late to save Sean. Since its opening in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge has become a site of despair for many, with over 1,500 lives lost there. On average, dozens of people attempt to take their lives at the bridge each year. John's work was a reminder that while barriers might help, broader solutions were needed to address mental health struggles. Even as he mourned his grandson, he remained determined to advocate for these changes. The Golden Gate Bridge's safety barrier faced significant opposition over the years. Critics raised concerns about its cost, aesthetics, and potential impact on tourism. Yet John persisted, believing every life saved was worth the effort. Under his leadership, the project eventually gained approval, and construction began, though it would take years to complete. Sean's passing underscored the ongoing challenges of mental health and prevention. While the safety barrier represented progress, John acknowledged it wouldn't stop every tragedy. For him, it was part of a larger fight against an issue that affects countless families. "This is an epidemic," John said, hoping continued efforts could bring change. John Moylan's tireless advocacy left an enduring legacy on the Golden Gate Bridge, transforming it into a symbol of hope for countless lives. Sean's heartbreaking story is a powerful call to action, urging compassion and awareness for struggles often hidden in silence. Through his grief, John's unwavering dedication to preventing future tragedies is an inspiring testament to resilience and the power of change. One afternoon in May 2015, Wang Xiufing, 47, and her 16-year-old daughter, Lily Kaw Li-ling, embarked on what should have been an ordinary drive to pick up Wang's other children from school. The family lived in a tranquil neighborhood in Ma On Shan, Hong Kong. But things at home weren't as tranquil. Their family dynamic was increasingly strained, especially between Wang and her husband, Kaw Kim-sun. That day, mother and daughter left their home in Wang's yellow Mini Cooper to pick up Lily's siblings from school. The family helper saw them leave around 2 p.m., heading down Sai Sha Road. Their journey should have been a brief one, just a 1.6-kilometer trip to the bus terminal. At 2:14 p.m., Lily sent a lighthearted text to a friend joking about school. This would be the last message she ever sent. 30 minutes later, a jogger came across their parked car at a bus stop. Inside the car, Wang and her daughter were slumped and unresponsive. Emergency responders rushed them to Prince of Wales Hospital, but it was too late. Both Wang and Lily were declared dead, victims of severe carbon monoxide poisoning. Investigators were at a loss. They knew the mother and daughter had died due to lethal gas exposure, but the car itself was in pristine condition. It presented no defects. Hong Kong police, with assistance from Bavarian Motor Works engineers in Germany, thoroughly examined the Mini Cooper's ventilation system. When every avenue failed to explain the gas source, the case stalled. It wasn't until months later that the puzzle pieces started to fit, only because of a seemingly innocuous detail: a deflated gray yoga ball in the car's boot, conspicuously missing its stopper. The simple question of why it lacked a plug opened the door to one of Hong Kong's most chilling murder cases. Detectives learned that Wang's estranged husband, Kaw Kim-sun, was a respected associate professor of anesthesiology. The man was, by all accounts, brilliant, but his personal life was deeply troubled. Kaw was having an affair with a younger student and had grown distant from Wang, his wife. They remained together solely for the sake of their children, but the relationship had devolved into what was described as a business partnership. In truth, Kaw wanted his life out of the picture. Police found a paper trail connecting Kaw to carbon monoxide procurement. Under the guise of research, he had requested the gas for experiments at his university and later taken it home. As time passed, the investigations revealed the full depravity of his plan. A colleague testified that Kaw had asked him to assist in experiments involving carbon monoxide. On one occasion, the colleague saw Kaw filling 2 yoga balls with gas, one of which was later identified as the ball found in Wang's car. Experts confirmed that such balls could carry and slowly release carbon monoxide if left unplugged, creating a fatal environment in an enclosed space like a car. Confronted with mounting evidence, Kaw denied involvement in his wife and daughter's deaths. He claimed he had taken the gas home to deal with a rodent problem and suggested the yoga ball might have been misused by Lily to kill insects. The defense further argued that Kaw had an alibi, as he had left home for a seminar hours before the incident. Prosecutors countered that the yoga ball, planted earlier, could still maintain lethal gas concentrations for hours. Tests showed the concentration of carbon monoxide inside the Mini Cooper reached at least 7,000 parts per million, enough to incapacitate and kill within minutes. Kaw's trial began in 2017. Prosecutors painted a picture of a calculated and deliberate murder, motivated by Kaw's desire to end his unhappy marriage. The deaths, they argued, would allow him to inherit jointly owned properties and fully pursue his affair. While the motive for killing Wong seemed clear, Lily's death raised haunting questions, with some evidence suggesting Kaw had asked Lily to stay home that day. Friends and family described Kaw's close bond with his daughter, leading some to speculate that her death might have been unintended collateral damage. The jury found Kaw guilty of murder in 2018, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The case, dubbed the Yoga Ball murder, became infamous not only for its macabre ingenuity, but also for its deep emotional tragedy. Wong's other children, now left without their mother and sister, faced an unimaginable loss. For Wong and Lily, what should have been an ordinary drive turned into a fatal trap, orchestrated by someone they trusted most. Wong Siu-Fing is remembered as a caring mother who devoted her life to her children. Lily was a spirited, lively teenager whose life was cut way too short. In 2013, Sida Osman was a 5-year-old boy born to Somali refugee parents in Fort Worth, Texas. Though his family had fled violence and instability in Somalia, Sida's life in the United States was filled with hope. He was set to begin kindergarten in the fall and lived in a close-knit community of Somali families who supported one another. Sida would often spend his days riding his bike and playing with neighborhood children near their apartment complex. One June evening at about 6 p.m., Sida's mother called for him to come home. The little boy, eager to continue his adventures, hopped on his bike and pedaled away. Hours later, however, Sida had still not come home. Overcome by worry, his parents reported him missing at 10:30 p.m., prompting a massive search effort. Police, aided by K-9 units, helicopters, and mounted officers, scoured the neighborhood throughout the night. Despite their efforts, there was no trace of the little boy. Sida remained missing. The next day, at approximately 1 p.m., a passerby made a grim discovery. The lifeless body of the little boy was found under a tree in the backyard of a vacant house just a block from where Sida lived. The Tarrant County medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Somali community, which gathered to mourn Sida's death and demand justice and answers. It didn't take long for investigators to find their prime suspect, a 13-year-old boy from the same neighborhood. Witnesses reported seeing Sida with the teen in the backyard of the vacant house shortly before his disappearance. The teen, whose name remains withheld due to his age, had a history of violent and erratic behavior. He was known as a troublemaker who had been involved in theft, physical altercations, and even threats of violence. His father had left the family and the teen had remained in the care of his mother. But, sources claimed, the teen was physically abusive even towards his mother. According to police, the teenager became irritated with Sida, who had been persistently asking to be taken to the store. In a fit of rage, the teen used a 14-pound bowling ball to strike Sida in the head, describing the act as like spiking a football. When Sida fell, the teen allegedly straddled him and struck him a second time, fatally injuring the child. Shockingly, the teen later showed Sida's body to 3 friends who pleaded with him to call for help, but he refused. Hours after the murder, the teen even lied to Sida's mother when she asked if he had seen her son. The teenager's violent tendencies were well documented. Rick Stokes, founder of the Stokes Christian Boys' Home, described him as filled with rage and anger. His mother struggled to control his behavior despite seeking help and medication. The aftermath of Sida's death was marked by profound grief and a search for answers. Sida's family struggled to comprehend why anyone would harm their innocent child. The Somali community mourned collectively, their sorrow filling the courtroom as the case unfolded. The teen eventually pleaded guilty to capital murder, accepting a plea deal that sentenced him to 23 years in prison. During his sentencing, he tearfully addressed the Osman family, expressing remorse for his actions. Despite his apology, the devastating loss of Sida left an irreplaceable void in the lives of those who knew him. Sida's death also highlighted systemic failures. The teen's mental health struggles had led to repeated institutionalizations, but long-term solutions remained out of reach. His mother's attempts to seek help were met with temporary fixes that proved insufficient in the long run. For Sida's family, the grief remains an enduring reality. A vibrant life full of promise was cut tragically short, leaving a community to grapple with the senselessness of his loss. Lives can change in mere seconds in the most unexpected ways. It is a truth that the town of Lyshevo, nestled near the Volga River in Russia's Tatarstan Republic, came to understand on a fateful day in 2013. It began with a simple household task that spiraled into a catastrophic loss, leaving a young girl as the sole survivor of her family. It all started when Mikhail Chilishev, a 42-year-old law professor at Kazan Federal University, descended into the family cellar. It was supposed to be a simple, routine task. But unbeknownst to Mikhail, the potatoes stored in the cellar had rotted, releasing what was a foul odor, and even more importantly, a deadly gas. Glycoalkaloids, naturally occurring toxic compounds in potatoes, had accumulated to lethal levels, creating a virtually undetectable trap in the small room. Soon after Mikhail entered the cellar, the noxious fumes completely overwhelmed Mikhail, and he collapsed, never to rise again. A short while later, when Mikhail failed to return, his wife Anastasia became worried. The woman, who was 38 years old, decided to follow him into the cellar, concerned for his safety. Sadly, this decision sealed her fate. She entered the cellar and was overcome by the toxic gas almost immediately. She collapsed to the floor, joining her husband in his untimely end. Their son, Georgy Chelishev, was alarmed by his parents' prolonged absence. After all, they were supposed to go into the cellar and get right back, something they'd done so many times before. Concerned, Georgy, who was only 18 years old, entered the cellar next, only to succumb to the same deadly fate. Meanwhile, Anastasia's mother, 68-year-old Iraida, became increasingly anxious. She couldn't help but feel that something was incredibly wrong with her family. She decided she needed assistance, so she called a neighbor for help. But Iraida did not wait for help to come. The older woman took the matter into her own hands and decided to act herself. Tragically, Iraida also descended into the cellar before help could arrive, sealing her fate alongside her loved ones. In a twist of fate that resembles something out of a fairy tale, the family's daughter, 8-year-old Maria Chelisheva, was the only one of her family to survive. When she reached the cellar, she saw that the door was open, which allowed the lethal gases to dissipate enough to spare the little girl. But the sight she encountered would forever haunt her. Her entire family, her father, her mother, her brother, and her grandmother, lay lifeless on the floor. It was too late. The aftermath of this tragedy left Maria orphaned and inconsolable. Maria Chelisheva was taken in by relatives, but nothing could bring her family back. Her dad, Professor Mikhail Chelishev, was honored by Kazan Federal University in a moving ceremony held in its marble hall. The devastating incident highlighted the hidden dangers of everyday foods. Potatoes, a dietary staple, can produce toxic glycoalkaloids such as solanine and chaconine, especially when stored improperly or allowed to rot. These compounds disrupt cell membranes and affect the nervous system, causing symptoms like weakness, confusion, and in severe cases, death. Exposure to light, age, and physical damage significantly increase glycoalkaloid levels, concentrating the toxins just beneath the skin. While rare, poisoning from potatoes can have fatal consequences, as this tragedy so painfully demonstrated. It began as an ordinary Sunday in a quiet village near Heidenheim in Germany. Ludwig A., a 79-year-old man, and his wife, 80-year-old Inge, spent the first part of their day going to church. And then, it was time for their traditional Sunday roast. But the couple decided to forego this culinary tradition for a hearty vegetable stew. By the end of the day, it was clear that this seemingly innocent event would lead to an unimaginable tragedy. The couple had received zucchini from Ludwig's sister-in-law's garden, something that had become a yearly tradition by then. Alongside potatoes, onions, and turnips, the zucchini became the centerpiece of their lunch. As they ate, though, they noticed something was unusual about their stew. The dish was uncharacteristically bitter. They were accustomed to bitter taste since they grew and enjoyed radishes from their garden. But this was different. Inge chose not to finish her meal. Ludwig, however, ate his portion despite the bitterness. 2 hours later, they came to regret their decision. Both fell violently ill. Nausea and relentless vomiting gripped them, accompanied by diarrhea. Out of the two of them, though, Ludwig was faring worse. His condition rapidly worsened. His strength dwindled. And then, his face turned yellow. Alarmed, they decided it was time to seek medical help. Their family doctor promptly referred them to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed severe poisoning. The culprit, cucurbitacin, a toxic compound sometimes found in plants of the Cucurbitaceae family, including zucchini. The toxic compound is rare in cultivated vegetables, but can occasionally reappear due to cross-pollination with wild plants. Its bitter taste serves as a warning, but Ludwig and Inge had been unaware of its danger. The toxin attacked their organs with devastating effects. In Ludwig's case, his lungs became inflamed, and according to Inge, the toxin shredded his intestines. Inge, who had eaten less and vomited more frequently, began to recover. Ludwig's condition, however, spiraled downward. Inge made a full recovery and was discharged from the hospital, but Ludwig wasn't as fortunate. 3 days later, Ludwig A. passed away. Inge later reflected that her survival might have been due to her swift and severe reaction to the toxin, which expelled much of it from her system before it could do irreparable harm. His tragic death prompted investigations by health authorities and the Ellwangen Public Prosecutor's Office. The Chemical and Veterinary Investigation Office, also known as CVUA, issued an urgent warning. Vegetables such as zucchini, pumpkins, and cucumbers that taste bitter should not be consumed, as this could indicate the presence of cucurbitaceae. Maria Roth, the CVUA's director, confirmed that Ludwig's death was the first recorded fatality from this toxin in zucchini.
It was November 30th, 2004, in Kent, Washington. Philip Quinn, a 24-year-old man, was found dead in his trailer home after a tragic accident involving a lava lamp. Known for his curiosity, Philip was excited to try out his new lava lamp, a decorative item popular for the gentle movement of wax inside. These lamps heat the wax with a bulb, causing it to rise and fall inside a glass container. The lamp is designed to operate at around 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, with the wax melting slowly under the gentle heat of a 40-watt bulb. Philip's eagerness to see the lamp in action led to a fatal mistake. Philip grew impatient when the lava lamp didn't start working as quickly as he expected. Instead of waiting, he placed the lamp on his kitchen stove to speed up the process. This decision turned deadly, as the lamp's glass container was not built to handle the direct heat from a stove. The intense heat rapidly overheated the liquid and wax inside the bottle, causing them to expand faster than they were designed to. The wax, which normally rises and falls in a slow cycle, was now heating uncontrollably. Lava lamps are meant to function under controlled temperatures, and the stove's heat pushed the temperature far beyond safe limits. As the pressure inside the glass bottle grew, the lamp's structure couldn't contain it. Within moments, the bottle exploded. A large shard of glass from the lava lamp was propelled through the air with force, striking Philip directly in the chest. The glass pierced his heart, causing a fatal injury. In shock and immense pain, Philip managed to stumble into his bedroom before collapsing. His parents later found him lying dead on the floor, with the remains of the lava lamp scattered across the kitchen. Investigators quickly ruled out foul play or substance use. They determined that Philip's death was the result of an unfortunate accident caused by his impatience. Had he followed the safety guidelines provided with the lamp, the tragedy could have been avoided. During the investigation, police noted the burnt and shattered remains of the lava lamp in the kitchen. It was clear that Philip had tried to speed up the process by using the stove, leading to the explosion. Experts pieced together what likely happened. The wax inside the bottle finally began to move just before the glass container shattered from the excessive heat, sending deadly shards flying. The incident drew public attention, reminding everyone of the importance of following product safety instructions. Lava lamp manufacturers warn against placing the lamps near direct heat sources like stoves, as this poses a significant risk of overheating and explosion. Philip Quinn's death was even investigated by the popular TV show Mythbusters in 2006. In episode 17, the team attempted to recreate the circumstances of his death. They heated a lava lamp on an electric hot plate and used a human ribcage replica to simulate the effect. Their experiment confirmed that the lava lamp could explode when overheated, sending glass shards flying with dangerous force. While Mythbusters demonstrated that an explosion was possible, they didn't find a glass shard embedded in the torso of their human model, as Philip had experienced. However, their tests showed that the extreme heat from the stove caused the pressure inside the lamp to rise rapidly, making the explosion inevitable. Philip Quinn's story exemplifies how a moment of impatience can turn deadly. It underscores the importance of following safety guidelines and using household items correctly. While lava lamps are mesmerizing and beautiful, they are designed to function under specific conditions. When those conditions are ignored, even something as harmless as a decorative lamp can become dangerous.
Linda Goldblum, a 79-year-old grandmother of 7 and devoted Dodgers fan, was a lively woman, full of joy. Celebrating her recent birthday and 59th wedding anniversary with her husband Irwin, Linda had always cherished the simple pleasures of life: family, love, and baseball. A longtime Dodgers season ticket holder, she shared countless moments at the stadium with Irwin, their dates often spent cheering from the low level. That summer evening on August 25, 2018 was supposed to be no different. That night, the Dodgers faced the San Diego Padres in a close contest. Linda, accompanied by Irwin, his brother Michael, and sister-in-law Eve, had the perfect seats, third-row loge level, slightly to the first base side of home plate. She wore Dodgers blue, cheered enthusiastically, and soaked in the atmosphere as the game stretched into the ninth inning. The excitement mirrored her passion for the team she had loved for decades. But as the final inning began, tragedy struck. In the top of the ninth inning, Padres batter Franmil Reyes fouled off a pitch from Dodgers closer Kenley Jansen. The ball shot backward with terrifying speed, a white blur that cleared the protective netting and struck Linda on the right side of her head. Witnesses described it as a bolt of lightning, giving no time for reaction. The impact was so severe that the ball ricocheted to the row above and then bounced off Michael's chest before settling several rows away. Linda immediately slumped in her seat, prompting Irwin, who was sitting beside her, to lean over in alarm. He asked if she was okay, but her brief response that she was not would be the last words she ever spoke. Ushers quickly arrived and emergency medical technicians rushed her to Los Angeles County University of Southern California Medical Center. In the ambulance, Linda vomited, a sign of the catastrophic injury she had sustained. Emergency surgery was performed to relieve pressure on her brain, but she never regained consciousness. For 3 days she remained on a ventilator, unresponsive except for a fleeting movement of her finger when asked her name. On August 28th, her family gathered by her side, sharing memories and saying goodbye before fulfilling her wishes not to be kept alive by machines. Linda Goldblum passed away the next morning. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as acute intracranial hemorrhage due to a history of blunt force trauma from the batted ball. Despite the magnitude of the tragedy, the incident received no media coverage at the time. The moment the ball struck, Linda was not televised, and the Dodgers made no public acknowledgement until pressed by Entertainment and Sports Programming Network 6 months later. Their brief statement expressed condolences and revealed that the matter had been resolved with the Goldblum family. No further details were provided. For Irwin and his family, the aftermath was a mixture of profound grief and frustration. Although the family chose not to pursue legal action due to the baseball rule protecting teams from liability for foul ball injuries, they remained determined to prevent similar accidents. Linda's daughter, Jana Brody, advocated publicly for expanded and heightened protective netting at Major League Baseball stadiums. At the time of Linda's death, Major League Baseball had recently recommended extending netting to the far ends of the dugouts, but it was not enough. Spurred by public outcry and advocacy from families like the Goldblums, teams across the league began further increasing netting height and coverage. A year after the tragedy, the Dodgers raised their netting by 8 feet, a small but meaningful step toward ensuring fan safety. Linda Goldblum's death was only the second fatality from a foul ball in Major League Baseball history, following the 1970 death of 14-year-old Alan Fish, also at Dodger Stadium. On July 26, 2016, in Laketown Township, Michigan, tragedy struck a small agricultural company, leaving a young family shattered. The victim was 23-year-old Robert Herwire, a recently married man just days away from becoming a father. What began as a typical workday at AgriScience Technology Company ended in a devastating incident that shook his loved ones and the local community. Robert, known for his kind nature, had a bright future ahead. 8 months earlier, in November 2015, he married Joy, and together they were preparing to welcome their first child. The couple had recently settled into their new home, eagerly anticipating their baby's arrival. Robert, a former high school athlete who loved outdoor activities like fishing and hunting, was cherished for his positive energy and sense of humor. That day, Robert was assigned to clean a large plastic tank containing diluted molasses, a thick, sticky liquid commonly used in agriculture. The tank, about 12 feet tall, had been partially emptied, but as the liquid level dropped, pumping it out became challenging. Always willing to help, Robert volunteered to enter the tank to adjust a valve. He wore protective waders and a safety mask, believing they would shield him from any hazards. With the help of a forklift and straps, Robert was lowered into the confined space. At first, everything went smoothly and he adjusted the valve without issue. But as he began to climb out, something went wrong. According to Kevin de Herrera, a co-worker assisting him, Robert suddenly stopped moving. Despite Kevin's attempts to call out to him, Robert remained unresponsive, standing motionless near the tank wall. Kevin tried to lift him out using the straps but was unable to do so. Realizing the severity of the situation, Kevin ran to get help. The company owner, David Alexander, quickly responded. Using an electric saw, David and Kevin cut a hole in the tank's side to reach Robert, who had slipped into the molasses. It took several minutes to pull him out, during which Robert was submerged in the dense liquid. Time was critical, and every second mattered. Once he was out, Robert's mask was removed and his co-workers began CPR. Emergency responders arrived shortly after and transported him to Holland Community Hospital. Despite their efforts, Robert could not be revived and was pronounced dead. The news was devastating, especially for Joy, who was just a week away from giving birth. Robert's father, Brian Herwire, expressed the family's immense sorrow, stating that Robert had so much to live for, particularly his child. Friends and relatives remembered him as someone who brought joy to others and genuinely cared for people. An investigation by the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or MIOSHA, was launched to determine the cause of the accident and whether safety protocols had been followed. Concerns were raised about the protective gear Robert used and whether it was sufficient for the task. There was also speculation about the role of fumes inside the tank. Molasses can release gases in confined spaces, reducing oxygen levels and potentially causing dizziness or loss of consciousness. It remains unclear if this contributed to Robert's collapse or if another factor was involved. The official cause of death was determined to be drowning. Medical examinations confirmed that Robert had inhaled molasses while submerged. This detail underscored the severity of the risks involved in his task and the need for improved safety measures. In the aftermath, Robert's family and friends came together to support Joy and the unborn baby. A GoFundMe page set up by his sister-in-law raised over $12,000 within days to help cover funeral expenses and provide financial assistance. Messages of condolences poured in from the community, reflecting the impact Robert had on those around him. On July 30th, a funeral service was held at Bethany United Reformed Church. Family, friends, and co-workers gathered to honor Robert's life, sharing their grief and memories of the young man who had touched so many lives. It was August 17, 2000, at the Ford Transit van plant in Southampton, England. This factory, a major site for producing the famous vans, was bustling with activity. Among the workers was 30-year-old Christopher Shute, a technical advisor employed by Philip Services Europe Limited, a contractor for the plant. Christopher's role involved troubleshooting technical issues at the facility. However, that day, a tragic accident would claim his life, an event both preventable and devastating. At the center of the plant's paint recycling system was a 100,000-gallon tank, designed to collect and process overspray paint for reuse. From the beginning, the system had issues, frequently malfunctioning and causing overflows of a solvent-based rubberized paint mixture, used as an undercoat for the vehicles. The tank's design posed significant hazards. Elevated 2.4 meters off the floor and accessible only by ladder, its top lacked guardrails and was often slippery with paint residue. Despite these dangers, no major safety improvements were made. Alarmingly, a prior incident had already exposed the risks when another worker fell into the tank while cleaning it. Though that worker survived, it was a clear warning that the tank was unsafe. On that morning, Christopher was called to handle yet another overflow. Foam and paint were spilling over the tank, and one of its lids had been removed, leaving an opening. The surface was slick, and the gap was hard to see under the layers of paint. Climbing the ladder, Christopher stepped onto the tank's surface to investigate. A colleague stood below, observing as he cautiously moved across the slippery top. Tragically, Christopher lost his footing and slipped through the uncovered opening into the tank. The colleague tried to help, reaching out to grab him, but the surface was too slick. Christopher disappeared into the tank where the thick paint mixture made it impossible to climb out. Emergency crews, including firefighters and paramedics, arrived quickly, but Christopher was unresponsive when pulled from the tank. Despite immediate first aid, he was pronounced dead. The incident sent shockwaves through the factory and beyond. An investigation by the Health and Safety Executive, or HSE, and local police revealed severe safety failings. The tank's lack of guardrails, its flawed design, and inadequate safety protocols were identified as major factors. Ford and its contractors had been aware of the risks, but failed to take meaningful action, even after the earlier incident. The case went to Winchester Crown Court, where Ford Motor Company and two contractors, Peter Preston and Paul McKenzie, faced charges under the Health and Safety at Work Act of 1974. Preston and McKenzie, responsible for workers' safety, initially faced more serious charges but later pleaded guilty to failing to ensure proper safety measures. Ford admitted to breaching safety regulations, acknowledging they had not provided a safe work environment. The company was fined £50,000 to £300,000 for endangering its employees and £250,000 for putting others at risk. They were also ordered to pay £46,688 in legal costs. Preston and McKenzie were each fined £5,000, a penalty criticized by many as inadequate given the seriousness of the incident. Mr. Justice Stuart McKinnon, who presided over the case, condemned the lack of safety measures, calling the accident entirely unnecessary and waiting to happen. While he criticized Ford's systemic failings, he explained that the fines were based on the defendant's financial situations and were not intended to measure the value of a human life. For Christopher's family, the court's decision provided little comfort. His sister, Ann Gundry, spoke out about the perceived injustice, especially the decision to drop more severe charges against Preston and McKenzie. She expressed frustration that the full details of the case were not heard in court. The family pursued a civil lawsuit against Ford and the two contractors, seeking further accountability. Ann described the incident as a result of systemic negligence and demanded answers about the circumstances that led to her brother's death. In response to the tragedy, Ford implemented changes to improve safety. Guardrails were added around the tank, and safety protocols were updated to prevent similar incidents. However, these changes came too late for Christopher. His death became a reminder of the consequences of neglecting workplace safety. It was December 8, 2015, in Patagonia, Chile. Douglas Tompkins, the 72-year-old founder of the North Face, was kayaking on General Carrera Lake. This massive lake spans 1,150 square miles and is known for its breathtaking scenery and dangerous waters. It is also infamous for sudden storms caused by unpredictable weather and strong winds. Tompkins, an outdoor enthusiast, had built a career around his love for nature. From rock climbing as a teenager to creating one of the most iconic outdoor gear brands, his connection to the wilderness was undeniable. In later years, he became a devoted environmentalist, purchasing large tracts of land in Chile and Argentina to protect Patagonia's beauty. These lands became conservation parks, a legacy of his efforts to safeguard nature. On this particular day, Tompkins was kayaking with 5 others. A sudden storm swept over the lake as they paddled, turning calm waters into towering waves up to 3 meters high. The group struggled against the storm but couldn't maintain control. All 6 kayaks overturned, throwing the kayakers into the freezing water. The lake's temperature rarely exceeds 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and cold water like this can cause hypothermia within minutes. Struggling in the icy waters, 3 kayakers managed to swim to a small island, but Tompkins and 2 others remained in the lake, unable to reach safety. Tompkins, who had spent his life advocating for outdoor safety and designing gear to protect people in extreme conditions, now found himself vulnerable to the elements. Despite having the knowledge and equipment to face such situations, the extreme cold took its toll. Emergency responders acted quickly. A military patrol boat and a helicopter were dispatched to rescue the stranded group. 3 kayakers were pulled from the water by boat, while Tompkins and the others were airlifted to the nearest hospital in Coyhaique, about 1,000 miles south of Santiago. By the time Tompkins arrived, his body temperature had dropped to 19 degrees Celsius, or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, far below what the human body can survive. Medical staff worked tirelessly to warm him, but his condition was critical. Despite their efforts, Tompkins passed away at 6:30 p.m., a victim of severe hypothermia. His death profoundly affected his family and the global outdoor and environmental communities. Tompkins' passing sparked tributes from around the world. The North Face, the company he co-founded in 1966, called him a passionate environmental advocate. His work in conservation and his commitment to protecting natural landscapes were praised widely. His death, however, carried a deep irony. Despite his lifelong dedication to mastering and protecting the outdoors, nature proved more powerful than any preparation. Born in 1943 in Ohio and raised in Millbrook, New York, Tompkins showed an early love for the outdoors. By his teens, he was rock climbing in the Shawangunk Mountains. At 17, he left prep school and moved west, skiing and climbing in Colorado and California. His passion for wilderness set the course for his future. 1966, Tompkins co-founded the North Face, initially catering to serious skiers and climbers. The company grew into a global outdoor gear brand, but by 1969 he sold his share and pursued new ventures. He co-founded Esprit, a multinational clothing company, alongside his first wife, Susie Russell. However, after their divorce in 1989, Tompkins left the fashion industry, disillusioned by its role in environmental harm. From then on, he dedicated his life to conservation. In the 1990s, Tompkins moved to Chile and began buying land in Patagonia to protect it from industrial development. In 1991, he founded Pumalin Park, a 716 606-acre reserve stretching from the Andes to the Pacific. Working with his second wife, Christine Tompkins, former CEO of the Patagonia clothing brand, he expanded these efforts, turning vast areas into protected lands. Though some Chilean politicians accused Tompkins of land grabbing, many viewed him as a visionary who used his wealth to preserve nature. His dedication to protecting Patagonia's landscapes inspired conservationists worldwide. At his death, Tompkins had secured millions of acres of land for conservation, ensuring their protection for future generations. While his loss was devastating, his work left a lasting impact on the environmental movement. Tompkins spent his life advocating for the natural world, and though his final moments were shaped by the wilderness he loved, his legacy continues in the lands he preserved. September 26, 2010, in Boston Spa, a small West Yorkshire, England village, Jimmy Heselden, a 62-year-old businessman and philanthropist, was riding a Segway X2. This rugged off-road model, designed to handle uneven terrain, was part of the product line of Segway Incorporated, the company he owned. Heselden had recently acquired the company and hoped to revive its fortunes after its initial buzz in the early 2000s had faded. Heselden was riding along a narrow bridleway near the river wharf. The path was uneven with tree roots and ruts, and ran above a steep drop into the river. While riding, Heselden encountered Sean Christie, who was walking his dog. To make room for Christie to pass, Heselden reversed his Segway. The uneven ground made balancing difficult, and the Segway slipped, sending Heselden over the edge. He fell approximately 42 feet into the river below. Christie rushed to help and found Heselden unresponsive in the water. Emergency services were called, but by the time they arrived, it was clear Heselden had passed away. Investigators determined there was no malfunction with the Segway, and the coroner ruled the death an accident caused by the fall. The incident was a tragic result of an act of courtesy and the difficult terrain. Heselden's death was particularly ironic because it involved the very product he was trying to promote. Known as one of the wealthiest men in the UK, he had built his fortune through Hesco Bastion. This company manufactures collapsible wire mesh containers for protective barriers in military zones. Despite his wealth, Heselden remained grounded, often giving generously to charity. He donated millions to local causes, including £10 million to the Leeds Community Foundation. The Segway was intended to revolutionize personal transport, but struggled to gain widespread acceptance. While it was designed to be safe, questions arose about its suitability for rough terrain. However, the investigation confirmed that the Segway was functioning properly and that the accident was caused by the challenging conditions and Heselden's movement on the path. After Heselden's passing, Segway Incorporated faced an uncertain future. In 2013, it was sold to Roger Brown, who aimed to make the product more accessible by reducing costs and redesigning its features. Segway later gained modest success in the ride-sharing industry, with companies like Bird and Lime using it for urban transportation. In 2015, Ninebot acquired Segway, helping improve its profitability by adapting the brand to meet new market demands. Despite these efforts, the original Segway was discontinued in 2020. The company shifted its focus to electric bikes, scooters, and other technologies, leaving behind the ambitious invention that promised to change how people moved. Heselden's death sparked discussions about safety and the limitations of technology. His legacy as a philanthropist and successful entrepreneur remains significant, but his tragic accident while riding the Segway tells us about the unpredictability of life. It was July 28, 1980, when 32-year-old Troy Leon Gregg escaped from Georgia State Prison. He was on death row for a double homicide and armed robbery in 1973. That night, Gregg and inmates Timothy McCorquodale, Johnny L. Johnson, and David Jarrell carried out an audacious escape plan. They sawed through cell bars, climbed ledges, and disguised themselves in stolen prison guard uniforms. Their plan worked, and they passed through several security checks unnoticed. This marked the first successful death row escape in Georgia's history. Once outside, they reached a car parked by a relative of one of the inmates. For a brief moment, they tasted freedom. However, Greg's escape took a tragic turn before the night ended. Greg's story began in 1973 when he was 25. While hitchhiking through Florida with 16-year-old Floyd Allen, they were picked up by Fred Simmons and Bob Moore. Simmons' car broke down during their journey, and he purchased another vehicle with his own money. Hours later, events spiraled into violence. Greg claimed Simmons attacked him during an argument, forcing him to act in self-defense. He said he shot Simmons and Moore to protect himself. Allen, however, told a different story. He testified that Greg had planned to rob the men and had confided this plan to him. According to Allen, Greg shot Simmons and Moore, then ensured they were no longer alive before taking their belongings and stealing the car. They drove off but were eventually caught when a previous companion, Dennis Weaver, recognized the victims in a newspaper and alerted authorities. Greg was arrested with a .25 caliber handgun and later convicted of robbery and the deaths of Simmons and Moore, receiving a death sentence. Greg's trial became significant in U.S. legal history. His case was among the first to uphold a death sentence after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976 following the Furman v. Georgia decision. Greg's case introduced a two-phase trial system to ensure fairness in sentencing. Despite his conviction, Greg never stopped planning his escape. On the night of July 28, 1980, he and the other inmates carried out their plan. They exited their cells, reached a fire escape, and walked past guards disguised as staff members. Afterward, Greg called a local newspaper, the Albany Herald, to complain about prison conditions. This call tipped off officials about his escape. By nightfall, Greg found himself in a North Carolina bar. Accounts of what happened next vary. One version suggests Greg, under the influence of alcohol, confronted a waitress, leading to an altercation with a biker who defended her. The confrontation escalated and Greg was fatally beaten. Another version claims that his fellow escapees turned on him, accusing him of betraying them by revealing their escape plan. They allegedly attacked him in a fit of anger. Regardless of the details, Greg's body was later found in the Catawba River. His cause of death was determined to be suffocation caused by swelling from severe injuries. Meanwhile, the remaining escapees didn't get far. Within 3 days, McCorquodale, Johnson, and Jarrell were captured in an abandoned house. Though McCorquodale and another man, James Cecil Horn, were initially charged in connection with Greg's death, the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. The exact circumstances of Greg's death remain unresolved. Troy Leon Gregg's escape ended mere hours after it began, with his death under mysterious and violent circumstances. He had spent years on death row, and his brief taste of freedom was cut short by events eerily similar to the crimes that had landed him there. Greg's story leaves many unanswered questions. What if he had successfully escaped? Could he have started a new life? Or would his past eventually catch up? What if his fellow escapees had remained united? Or if they had all evaded capture? Such questions linger, but the one certainty is that Greg's story exemplifies how actions often have unavoidable consequences, no matter how far in the past. His life and death remain tied to the history of the death penalty in the United States, a haunting reminder of justice, fate, and the irony of his final hours. It was the night of September 18, 2015 in Katni, a small town in Madhya Pradesh, India. Latori Barman, a 45-year-old farm laborer, attended a village fair. After the event, his wife left to visit her parents while Latori decided to head home alone. He had been drinking, and the road he took was poorly maintained. The path had a large, unmarked pothole. No warnings, barriers, or lights to indicate danger. It was pitch dark, and Latori, unaware of the hazard, stumbled into the deep hole, lost his balance, and fell. In his intoxicated state, he lost consciousness. That same night, a team of road workers arrived to repair the damaged section. Their task was to fill the pothole with a mixture of gravel and asphalt, and then flatten it with a steamroller. Unknowingly, they began working without noticing Latori lying at the bottom of the hole. They poured hot tar over him and completed the job, leaving him buried beneath the newly paved road. The following morning, villagers from Sleemanabad made a disturbing discovery. As one local walked along the freshly laid road, they noticed something unusual. Part of an arm was sticking out from the asphalt. Upon closer inspection, the horrifying truth emerged. Latori's body was buried beneath the road. Authorities were called and an investigation began. Latori had tragically passed away due to suffocation under the layers of hot tar. The police concluded that he had fallen into the pothole the previous night while intoxicated. The road workers, unaware of his presence, unknowingly sealed him under the fresh asphalt. The tragedy sparked outrage in the local community. Villagers protested, blocking roads and demanding accountability. The workers involved, including the truck driver who transported the asphalt and the individual who filled the pothole, were arrested and charged with negligence leading to a loss of life. This incident showed a much larger problem in India: the dangerous state of its roads. Poor maintenance, lack of safety measures, and hazardous infrastructure contribute to thousands of accidents annually. In rural areas and even major cities, potholes often turn into death traps, especially during the monsoon season. According to statistics, around 7,700 people lose their lives each year in India due to road-related hazards. The term killer craters has been used to describe these deadly potholes. In some areas, residents name these hazards after public officials to draw attention to the issue. Latoury's case became one of the many tragedies linked to inadequate infrastructure, sparking public calls for better road safety measures and stricter oversight of construction projects. As a response, local authorities offered Latoury's family a compensation of 50,000 rupees, or about $760. While the payment was intended to alleviate some of the financial strain on his widow and children, many felt it was an insufficient gesture considering the gravity of the incident. The tragedy also raised critical questions. How did the workers fail to notice Latoury in the pothole? Why were there no safety measures, such as barriers or warning signs, to prevent accidents like this? And why did it take a villager noticing his arm the next day for the truth to come to light? Latoury's death, though shocking, was not an isolated incident. India's roads claim thousands of lives annually, with poorly maintained roads playing a significant role. These accidents often go unnoticed until they result in devastating consequences. Latoury's story is an example of the dangers posed by neglect and lack of oversight. Improving infrastructure is key to preventing such tragedies. Roads need proper construction, regular maintenance, and safety measures like visible signage and protective barriers. However, challenges such as corruption and poor accountability in India's public works system hinder meaningful progress. Latoury Barman's untimely passing is a warning about the cost of neglecting road safety. While the workers involved were charged, the real tragedy lies in how preventable his death could have been if basic precautions had been in place. His story underscores the urgent need for reform in road safety and infrastructure management in India. July 26, 2010, in California, when 80-year-old Maria de Jesus Arroyo suffered a heart-related incident at home. Emergency responders rushed her to White Memorial Hospital in Los Angeles, where doctors tried to revive her but ultimately declared her dead. Her passing was attributed to cardiac arrest. Following standard procedure, hospital staff placed her body in the morgue freezer, unaware that this decision would lead to a horrifying tragedy. Maria was a beloved mother of 8, grandmother, and wife of 63 years. Her family, who had just celebrated her 80th birthday, believed she had passed peacefully. They began funeral arrangements without suspicion. However, when the morticians received her body days later, they made a shocking discovery. Maria's body was found face down in the bag, her face bruised, cut, and disfigured with a broken nose. These injuries were too severe to have occurred post-mortem or during routine handling. Devastated, the family initially assumed mishandling by hospital staff. They filed a lawsuit accusing the hospital of negligence. But as experts examined the case, a much more disturbing explanation came to light. A pathologist, Dr. William Lewis Manion, reviewed Maria's injuries and concluded that she had likely been alive when placed in the freezer. His analysis suggested that the cold temperatures caused her to regain consciousness. Disoriented and trapped in darkness, Maria might have struggled to free herself, causing the injuries on her face. Tragically, the freezing conditions ultimately led to her death. Dr. Manion's findings described an unthinkable scenario. He concluded that Maria had been improperly placed in the freezer while still alive, face up instead of face down. This position, combined with her attempts to escape, resulted in severe injuries. The disfigurement, including bruises and cuts, indicated a desperate struggle, not damage that could occur after death. The hospital denied these claims, insisting they followed correct procedures and disputing the pathologist's conclusions. They argued there was no proof Maria had been alive when sent to the morgue. The family, now accusing the hospital of medical malpractice, filed another lawsuit in December 2011. Their lawyer, Scott Schutzman, called the case one of the most extreme examples of negligence. Schutzman remarked that it was every family's nightmare. He wondered aloud if anyone could imagine waking up in a sealed body bag, unable to escape. The legal process was fraught with obstacles. Initially, the case was dismissed due to the statute of limitations, as the family had waited more than a year to file. However, the Second District Court of Appeal overturned this ruling, stating the family could not have known the truth until receiving the pathologist report. The lawsuit was allowed to proceed, offering the family a chance to seek justice. Court records highlighted troubling inconsistencies in the hospital's actions. Reports suggested Maria's vital signs might not have been thoroughly checked before declaring her dead. EKG records showed potential signs of life, raising questions about whether the hospital had rushed its decision. These findings pointed to procedural failures with devastating consequences. For Maria's family, the ordeal was emotionally unbearable. They struggled to reconcile the horrifying details of her final moments with the loving memories they had of her. The idea that she woke up alone, cold, and fighting for her life was a haunting image they could not escape. The case brought attention to serious flaws in medical protocols. It underscored the dire need for thorough confirmation of death to avoid preventable tragedies. As the lawsuit unfolded, the Arroyo family remained determined to hold the hospital accountable, despite the hospital's continued denials and defense of its actions. This tragedy left lingering questions. What if Maria's vital signs had been rechecked? Could her life have been saved? And how did such an unimaginable mistake occur? For her family, the pursuit of answers and justice was their only comfort, though no legal outcome could erase the pain of what Maria endured in her final hours. 2015, on a regular Sunday in Jingzhou, a busy city in China's Hubei province, families were out shopping, and the Anliang department store was bustling with weekend crowds. For 30-year-old Xiang Liujuan and her 2-year-old son, it started as a typical outing, but ended in an unimaginable tragedy that shook the nation. Xiang and her son were nearing the top of an escalator when disaster struck. The metal floor panel beneath their feet suddenly gave way, exposing the machinery below. In a desperate act, Xiang pushed her son forward, saving his life as the floor collapsed. A nearby mall worker pulled the boy to safety, but Xiang was pulled into the escalator's mechanism. Despite efforts to save her, she was unable to escape. CCTV footage captured the harrowing moments. Xiang was seen holding her son, struggling to push him away from the danger as the floor crumbled. In those final seconds, she disappeared into the machinery, while a mall employee tried to grab her hand, but it was too late. Her husband, Zhang Wei, was shopping on another floor and witnessed the incident, helpless to intervene. What made this tragedy even harder to bear was that it could have been prevented. Just minutes before the collapse, mall staff noticed the loose metal panel. 2 employees found screws missing, leaving the plate unstable. Yet no action was taken to shut down the escalator or warn shoppers. There were no signs, barriers, or immediate safety measures. The head of the local safety administration later revealed that maintenance work had been done on the escalator earlier that day. However, the workers had failed to secure the panel properly. This oversight led to the fatal accident. Witnesses said the mall employees tried to warn Xiang as she approached the top, but by then it was too late. The escalator kept running, and within moments the catastrophe unfolded. Emergency responders worked for 4 hours to recover Xiang's body from the machinery. By the time they succeeded, there were no signs of life. News of the incident quickly spread across Chinese social media, with millions reacting to the heartbreaking story. Many praised Xiang's heroic actions in saving her son, while others expressed outrage at the negligence that allowed the tragedy to happen. Questions arose about why the escalator wasn't shut down immediately after the loose screws were discovered. The employees, it was revealed, lacked training in handling such emergencies. Experts also criticized the design of the escalator. Charles Wong Kai-hun, a safety expert, explained that relying on screws to secure panels was unsafe and prone to failure. He noted that the cover should have been designed to remain stable under stress. But design flaws weren't the only issue. The larger problem was the lack of accountability and immediate action by the mall. The department store remained silent, refusing to release a statement or take responsibility. Investigations were ongoing, but the public's frustration continued to grow. Many saw this as part of a broader issue with safety standards in public spaces. This incident is not unique. In recent years, several similar escalator-related tragedies have occurred in China, highlighting systemic problems with maintenance and safety enforcement. In 2012, a young boy lost his life in a similar accident at a Beijing department store. Months earlier, a subway escalator malfunction in Beijing claimed another life. These repeated tragedies reveal ongoing lapses in safety protocols. Following Xiang's death, local authorities suspended the use of escalators made by Shenlong Elevator Limited, the manufacturer of the faulty machine. Inspectors were sent to check all escalators and elevators in the region to prevent further accidents. However, for Xiang's family, these actions came too late. They were left grieving a mother, wife, and daughter whose life was cut short. Xiang's family had refrained from discussing compensation until the investigation concluded. They wanted accountability for the preventable errors that led to her death. For now, they focus on honoring her memory, especially her last act of courage in saving her son. This tragedy is a grim reminder of the importance of safety in public spaces. It raises difficult questions. What if the staff had acted sooner? Could Xiang have been saved if the escalator was stopped or shoppers were warned in time? And how many more accidents are waiting to happen due to negligence and poor infrastructure? Xiang Liujuan's story is a heartbreaking example of heroism and the devastating consequences of preventable mistakes. It underscores the urgent need for better safety measures, proper training, and stricter accountability to ensure such tragedies never happen again. It was September 3, 2010, in the rural county of Devon, England. Mike Edwards, a former cellist for the legendary 1970s rock band Electric Light Orchestra, or ELO, was driving along the A381 road near Totnes. A beloved figure in the music world, Mike was heading to a concert when an unforeseen event changed everything. A massive hay bale, weighing nearly 600 kilograms, or 1,300 pounds, rolled down a hillside, crashed into his van, and caused his untimely passing. This tragic and rare accident shocked the music community and left many wondering how such a bizarre event could happen. Mike Edwards was born on May 31, 1948 in West London. Music was a constant in his life, inspired by his father, who played the cello as a hobby. Mike's talent led him to the prestigious Royal Academy of Music, where he honed his skills and became a versatile musician, mastering classical, jazz, and eventually rock music. In 1972, Mike joined ELO, a band known for blending classical elements with rock. His cello played a central role in their innovative sound, and his eccentric performances quickly made him a fan favorite. Mike was known for his unconventional antics on stage, such as using fruit as a bow for his cello, or adding pyrotechnics to his performances. These unique displays became part of ELO's identity during its early years. Despite his success with ELO, Mike left the band in 1975 seeking a quieter life. He focused on teaching, performing with local ensembles, and exploring creative music projects. Later, he adopted the name Swami Deva Pramada, reflecting his spiritual journey as a follower of the Indian teacher Osho. Though he stepped away from the spotlight, his contributions to music left a lasting impact. On the day of the accident, Mike was driving through a quiet, agricultural stretch of Devon. Unknown to him, a hay bale had been left near the edge of a sloped field. The bale had been moved the day before by Russell Williams, a contractor working for farmer Brian Burden. Due to equipment issues, Williams couldn't finish the job that day and left the bale in place, assuming it was secure. Tragically, it wasn't. As Mike passed along the road, the hay bale detached and rolled down the steep hill, crashing through a wire fence and hedge before colliding with his van. The impact was devastating and left Mike with no chance of survival. It was a sunny, clear day, making the event all the more shocking. The news of Mike's passing devastated his family, friends, and fans. Investigators quickly examined the incident, focusing on the handling of the hay bale. Both Burden and Williams faced charges related to safety violations, with prosecutors arguing that the accident could have been prevented. However, during the trial, evidence showed that both men had acted responsibly, and the jury found them not guilty. The court concluded that the event was an unfortunate accident, one that could have happened to anyone under similar circumstances. Mike's death was mourned deeply. ELO co-founder Jeff Lynne remembered him as a talented musician and kind person, noting his iconic performances that had left a lasting impression. Fans and colleagues reflected on his legacy, recalling his creativity and contributions to music. In the years following the tragedy, Mike's family and community continued to honor his memory. His students, friends, and fellow musicians spoke of the profound impact he had on their lives, both as a teacher and an artist. Though his life ended abruptly, his passion and talent remained celebrated. Mike Edwards' passing stands as a sad reminder of how unpredictable life can be. From his groundbreaking work with ELO to his dedication to teaching and music, Mike left a mark that will not be forgotten. It was October 20th, 2007 in New Delhi, India. Surinder Singh Bajwa, the 52-year-old deputy mayor of Delhi, was spending a quiet evening at home. Bajwa had been elected to his position in April, just months earlier. As a senior member of the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, he was already a well-known figure in the local political scene. But that night, an unexpected event would change everything. Outside Bajwa's home, a group of rhesus macaques, a type of monkey known for being aggressive and territorial, entered the property. These monkeys were a growing problem in New Delhi, where urban development had disrupted their natural habitats. It wasn't uncommon for them to raid homes, steal food, or even confront people. But no one expected an incident this severe. Reports suggested that Bajwa noticed the monkeys and tried to scare them off. In his attempt to protect his home, he ended up on his balcony. What happened next was unclear, but it was believed that the monkey's aggressive behavior startled Bajwa, causing him to lose his balance and fall from the first-floor terrace. He suffered serious head injuries from the fall. Neighbors were horrified. Though the monkey problem was well known, no one had imagined it could lead to such a tragedy. Emergency services were called, and Bajwa was rushed to Indraprastha Apollo Hospital. Despite the doctor's efforts, his injuries were too severe, and he passed away the next day, October 21, 2007. Bajwa's death shocked the city. He was a dedicated public servant, a husband, and a father. His family was devastated by the sudden loss, and the community mourned the tragedy. His death also brought national attention to Delhi's long-standing monkey problem, an issue that had been neglected for years despite repeated complaints. In New Delhi, rhesus macaques had become a part of everyday life. They frequently invaded homes, damaged property, and even injured people. Children and pedestrians were particularly vulnerable to their aggressive behavior. The city's rapid urbanization had displaced the monkeys from their natural habitats, forcing them to adapt to urban areas where food and shelter were abundant. Local authorities had tried various methods to control the monkey population, but none had worked effectively. One approach involved using langurs, a larger species of monkey, to scare away the rhesus macaques. However, this solution created problems. Langurs were difficult to manage, and employing them was illegal. Some handlers lost their jobs, and the monkey issue persisted. In some cases, even government offices had been overrun by monkeys, with reports of sensitive documents being scattered by them. Bajwa's family and neighbors had dealt with monkey invasions before, but they hadn't imagined the problem would turn deadly. His death highlighted the authorities' inability to address the issue despite court orders demanding action. The problem had become so severe that a lawsuit had been filed against the government for its failure to act. The public response to Bajwa's death was a mix of grief and anger. While many offered condolences to his family, others criticized the government for ignoring a growing safety threat. Political leaders visited Bajwa's home to pay their respects, but frustration among residents was clear. Many demanded immediate action to prevent further incidents. One challenge in solving the monkey problem was the cultural and religious significance of these animals in India. Monkeys are considered sacred by many and are associated with the Hindu god Hanuman. Feeding monkeys is a common practice, which further encouraged their presence in urban areas. Efforts to remove or relocate the animals often face resistance from local communities. Following Bajwa's death, the Delhi Municipal Corporation, or MCD, announced plans to hire more monkey catchers and implement stricter measures to control the monkey population. However, many felt these actions were too late. The tragedy has been a grim reminder of the dangers posed by wildlife in urban areas and the need for a long-term solution. Bajwa's fall wasn't the first serious incident involving monkeys, but it was among the most high-profile. Over the years, monkeys have injured residents, damaged property, and disrupted daily life in the city. In one case, even the defense ministry had to deal with monkeys tampering with important documents. The issue wasn't just a nuisance. It had become a security and safety concern for Delhi. Bajwa's death underscored the urgent need for better wildlife management in the rapidly growing city. While efforts to address the problem continued, his passing remained a tragic reminder of what happens when urban development and nature collide without proper planning.
It was the evening of September 2008 in Edlington, South Yorkshire, England. Andrew Lee, a 33-year-old aspiring chef and forklift driver, had decided to participate in a daring challenge. Known for his love of cooking, Andrew wanted to test his limits with an incredibly spicy chili sauce. Cooking was more than a hobby for Andrew. He was passionate about trying new recipes and dreamed of someday becoming a chef in France. His room was filled with cookbooks, and he often created new dishes. On this particular evening, Andrew made a bet with his girlfriend's brother, Michael. The challenge was simple but risky, to see who could handle eating the hottest chili sauce. Andrew's father had grown the peppers used in the sauce, specially cultivated for the contest. With their plates ready, Andrew and Michael began the challenge. They ate the sauce with nachos, and Andrew added it to a plate of pasta. This was no ordinary sauce. It was made from some of the hottest peppers available. Even for someone like Andrew, who regularly used chili in his cooking, this was beyond what he had ever tried. At first, both men experienced the expected intense heat. Their faces turned red, and sweat poured down their skin. The sauce was overwhelming, but Andrew powered through. However, soon after the contest, Andrew started to feel an unusual itching sensation, which concerned him, but not enough to seek help immediately. As the night continued, Andrew's discomfort worsened. By 2:30 a.m., he went to bed at his girlfriend Samantha Bailey's house, still feeling the itch. Samantha, who had 4 children, tried to comfort him by scratching his back until he finally fell asleep. The next morning, Samantha woke up to a nightmare. Andrew was unresponsive, lying still in bed. She called for an ambulance, but despite the paramedics' best efforts, Andrew was declared dead at the scene. His sudden death shocked everyone. Andrew had been a healthy man, and had recently passed a full medical examination at work. No one could understand how a simple chili eating contest could have such a tragic outcome. An inquest was launched, and a post-mortem examination was conducted, but it didn't provide a clear cause of death. To further investigate, toxicology tests were ordered to see if the chili sauce could have caused a fatal reaction. Medical experts explained that allergic responses to chili peppers are rare, but possible. Capsaicin, the compound that makes chilies hot, has some health benefits, but can also cause serious issues in large amounts. Andrew's mother, Pamela, was devastated by her son's sudden death. She described him as a healthy, ambitious man who loved cooking and couldn't understand how such a normal activity could end in such a tragedy. The family waited anxiously for answers, hoping the toxicology results would clarify. This event raised awareness of the potential dangers of consuming extremely spicy foods. Health experts warned against the trend of breeding hotter and hotter chili varieties, noting that even mild reactions can include burning eyes, a runny nose, and hiccups. In rare cases, severe reactions can lead to more serious complications, including heart issues, which might have happened in Andrew's case. Though the exact cause of his death remains unclear, it's evident that the ultra-hot chili sauce played a significant role. Andrew's love for cooking and willingness to take on culinary challenges ended unexpectedly and heartbreakingly. What if Andrew had decided to skip the challenge that night? What if he had seen the itching as a sign to get medical help? These lingering questions show us the risks that sometimes come with even the most innocent activities. It was February 22nd, 2008, in Swansea, South Wales. A 34-year-old graphic design student, Adam Dealey, attended a photography exhibition at the Monkey Cafe nightclub. Originally from Birmingham, Adam had moved to Swansea to pursue his degree, working part-time at the club to support his studies. He wasn't working, but enjoying the event with his friends that night. Adam was known for his friendly personality and love of having fun. As the night went on, a spontaneous eating contest began among the attendees. It started as a light-hearted joke, seeing who could stuff the most fairy cakes, small sponge cakes, into their mouths. One person managed to fit 3, then another fit 4. Adam caught up, decided to join in, and attempted to cram 5 cakes into his mouth. However, things quickly took a serious turn. Adam realized he couldn't breathe and started choking. He walked towards the toilets, likely trying to spit out the cakes. Unfortunately, his friends initially thought he was still joking and didn't notice the severity of the situation. One of Adam's friends, Daniel Finselbach, noticed something was wrong and followed him to the toilets. There, he saw Adam convulsing, struggling to cough up the cakes. Daniel immediately attempted the Heimlich maneuver, trying to dislodge the food from Adam's throat. Despite his efforts, Adam collapsed and hit his head on the toilet. Paramedics were called immediately. They arrived within 10 minutes, but by then Adam had already gone into cardiac arrest. They rushed him to Singleton Hospital, continuing their attempts to revive him, but sadly, Adam was pronounced dead at 3:20 a.m. The news of Adam's death shocked everyone who knew him. Amanda Davey and Paul Dyke, the owners of the Monkey Cafe, were devastated. In a statement, they expressed their deep sorrow and offered condolences to Adam's family, calling it a tragic and avoidable accident. An inquest into Adam's death was held, confirming that the cause was choking due to the blockage of food in both his upper and lower airways. Dr. Maurizio Brotto, who performed the post-mortem, verified this. The coroner, Philip Rogers, recorded a verdict of misadventure, emphasizing the risks of such actions, saying, "It doesn't take me to say that trying to fit as much food in your mouth as possible is dangerous." During the inquest, it was revealed that Adam had been drinking that night and had about 1.5 times the legal drink-drive limit of alcohol in his system. However, Dr. Brotto explained that this level wouldn't have significantly impaired Adam's judgment, especially since he was used to drinking. The spontaneous nature of the cake-eating contest was a key point of discussion at the inquest. Stephen Jenkins, another attendee, explained how the contest started. "There was a tray of cakes from the buffet. My friend tried to fit 3 cakes in his mouth, so I tried to beat him by putting 4 in mine. Adam heard about it and tried 5. I saw that he was struggling, but then he walked towards the toilets." Daniel Finselbach, who had tried to save Adam, described what he witnessed. "I saw Adam walk towards the toilets, his body convulsing. There was cake around his mouth, and he was struggling to breathe. I ran after him and slapped his back hard, then tried the Heimlich maneuver, but he collapsed." The coroner's ruling of misadventure highlighted the accidental nature of Adam's death. Philip Rogers stressed that activities involving large amounts of food are inherently dangerous and should be avoided. He also clarified that the bar staff did not organize the cake-eating contest, but was an impromptu act by the attendees. Adam's family was deeply affected by his sudden death. He was their only child, and his parents, Sandra and Robert, were too devastated to attend the inquest. The last time they had seen Adam was during a visit to his university in December, just 2 months before the tragedy. They were proud of their son and his plans to move to New Zealand after finishing his studies. The Monkey Cafe community also mourned Adam's death. Flowers and tributes were laid outside the cafe in his memory. Paul Cunningham, a sound engineer at the club, expressed his sorrow and urged others to be cautious with similar pranks, warning, "Don't play these games. They can end in tragedy." He described Adam as a kind person who is loved by everyone and will be greatly missed.